on the payroll, it's easy to say it works, isn't it? But actually, out there in the real world, there is not a European demos, there is not a European identity. Maybe, but maybe, there may be one exception. There may be one exception, and that could be Belgium. Because nobody ever dares tell the truth about Belgium. Belgium is not a nation.
Belgium. It's one of the most fascinating countries in Europe. It's a country where some of its biggest political parties are explicitly anti-Belgium, where parties of the same political color are completely divided by virtue of language and culture alone, a country where public funding for political parties is some of the highest in the EU, and it's a country where its political divides serve as one of the strongest analogies for the divisions facing Europe as a whole. Belgium is a federal state that has to constantly struggle with balancing the Dutch-speaking Flemmings, the French-speaking Walloons, and also a smaller German-speaking minority. The federal government distributes power between two parliaments, a judiciary, and an executive branch, where language has to be accounted for at every single step. The executive, the constitutional court, and the Chamber of Representatives are all equally or proportionally split between the different language groups. And in Belgium, national parties do not exist. They represent some ideology, but what's more relevant is that they're split by language. When you examine below the federal government, all three language groups have their own distinct unicameral legislatures that each have their own executives, and the legitimacy of these communities is entirely based on language. However, what complicates things is that there are also regions, which also have their own parliaments and executives, and regions are not based on language and just have more generic state powers like management of public transport, the economy, and employment. For example, Flanders is a community, a government based off of a culture with its own common language, but it is also a region with generic state powers. In contrast, Brussels is a region with its own specific economic policies, but it is not a community. Brussels has to balance both a French and Dutch-speaking population. Either way, region or community, in Belgium, the divides, they're real. On the federal level, the two largest Flemish parties have been separated into the opposition, and regional governments are almost exclusively culturally focused. The Flemish independence movement is the largest party in the Flemish regional government, bar none, and the largest political party in Wallonia, PS, is almost exclusively Wallonian. In the media sector, each community has their own set of public platforms, be it radio, television, newspapers, or magazines. In education, where Flemish students are considered some of the best in Europe, with significantly higher reading, mathematics, and science skills, the Wallonian education system is below the European average. And in some cases, French parents in the Brussels region will send their children to Flemish schools as opposed to French-speaking ones for that reason alone. In regards to politics and economics, Flanders is also often seen as a creditor, while Wallonia is often characterized as a debtor. And in the 21st century, Flanders has been typically closer to balancing its budget and has also had less debt, where Wallonia, unfortunately, has had both a higher level of debt while also controlling a significantly lower share of national GDP and employment. It's pretty standard knowledge among Europeans that the distribution of power between the Walloons and Flemmings wasn't always this way. Where Wallonia used to receive massive amounts of revenue after the Industrial Revolution through its steel industry, and Flanders was historically poor and had a larger textile and agricultural sector and was also subjugated by the French-speaking elite, this dynamic essentially flipped as the Flemish city Antwerp grew in value as a seaport in the early 20th century. Also, where socialist-leaning policies have typically flourished in Wallonian industrial areas, the Flemish countryside has overwhelmingly voted more conservative and Catholic. The biggest unions, farmers' organizations, and also health insurance in Flanders is Catholic, while it is mainly state-regulated in Wallonia. This is also visible in the Flanders rural landscape, where houses are built seemingly random because for years the Catholic Party incentivized laborers that worked in industrialized cities to actually remain in the countryside by constructing homes in the middle of nowhere, which is obviously very expensive, just for the sake of trying to prevent Flemmings from building a socialist identity in industrialized cities. Today, a Flemish independence party is the largest party in Flanders. Although the Flemish independence movement was historically taboo, the World Wars allowed the Germans to seduce a section of the Flemish independence movement by offering an independent Flemish nation within the German Empire. In World War I, the Germans who were occupying Belgium conducted Vlaamenpolitiek and rule and divide, exploiting a fraction of the Flemish independence movement by establishing the first Dutch university in Ghent, and also by making the University of Ghent Dutch-speaking, when Dutch wasn't even considered as a potential option for a research language. In 1968, at the University of Leuven, Flemish students and professors kicked out the French-speaking section of its university, while the French speakers built New Leuven, a French-speaking university 15 kilometers away in Wallonia. Since then, state reforms have been incremental but significant, very complex, expensive, and hard, each giving more responsibility to the regions and communities and less to the Belgian federal government. Take a northern Western European country and compare it with a southern one, and you should be able to make a couple of sound generalizations about these countries just by looking at the differences between the north and south of Belgium. Like Belgium, the north of Europe is more dependent on services and trade and has recently had a stronger economy, while the south is more dependent on industry, tourism, and is considered by some metrics economically weaker, being more likely to suffer from economic shocks than its northern counterparts. Like Belgium, there is an important difference, which does matter, between Roman and Germanic culture. And like Belgium, where consensus literally takes the longest on the planet, the EU also has extreme difficulty with balancing European countries in order to get even something close to unanimity. Finally, like Belgium, Europe is also uncertain about what it's going to do with itself in the future.